be using, I would ask that everyone stay muted, and then we will be using the chat section. For a lot of people, if you're on a computer, chat is down at the bottom of your screen. For me, I have to click on the more button to see it, but it's there, and that would be where you could put your questions as you have them come to you, or you could wait until the presentation is complete. And then once the presentation is complete, we will start to go through some of those questions. As I stated before, your feedback is really important to us. We have been working very hard to put together a plan that we think is going to be equitable and allow our students access to the best educational services we can provide. But we also know that there are things that we maybe haven't thought of. So please give us your thoughts, your feelings, your questions. We need those. This plan will be fluid because we are living in a fluid world. So what is here today is a draft, and it probably will change. So these are the questions we're hoping you will consider as you're going through the presentation, as I'm going through the presentation with you today. So when you look at these plans, what are you most excited about? What challenges or suggestions for improvement do you see? What questions do you still have? And we'll try and get to questions as much as we can. And then any overall comments that you have. So if you are jotting notes or in a place where you can jot notes as we go through the presentation, again, you have the option to do a chat question, or and then there'll be a link later on for you to input the other information. So here we go. Ready? There's a lot of information, so I'm going to apologize in advance for the length of this presentation, but I think it's important that we also get as much information to you as we can. So on March 16th, we're just going to kind of set context. Governor Walz closed our schools due to COVID-19, and schools across the state of Minnesota engaged in distance learning for the last quarter of the school year. At that time, teachers created the absolute best distance learning they could, given the large learning curve. It was pretty much straight up, and a short amount of time that they were given to learn the tools and technologies that would be required in distance learning, as well as families and students having that same learning curve. Minnesota Department of Education continued to provide guidance to schools and update us with information almost daily as it changed. We did do a family survey in May when school was let out. Overall, the community survey indicated that 70% of you felt the instruction format was appropriate for your student or your child. 80.5% felt the instruction challenged your child appropriately, which was good to see. And almost 90% felt that the assessments the teachers were giving were appropriate and getting a clear picture of what the student knew. Some of the statements I tried to pick up on themes because there were many statements that you left, and we again appreciate that feedback, is that teachers were easy to contact and seemed flexible to work with the students and help them as they could. Most teachers worked from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. during this time period, and they really did try and accommodate students and their families as much as they could. Parents reported that their child seemed to know what they needed to do after a week or two and were able to get going on the learning. Their child was learning to be a bit more independent in their learning, which was kind of a nice thing to find out. Most teachers tried to establish a routine for students and help them manage their time. Parents felt their child was continuing to learn state standards, so we were not just in that maintaining learning mode, but that we were actually continuing to learn a little bit more new information as well. and that students really enjoyed seeing their teachers and their peers on Zoom. Some of the challenges that came up were spotty or non-existent internet, and we know that that is a challenge we continue to have in our community. The inconsistencies of teachers using Schoology pages, Seesaw, Facebook, and having to try and navigate all three of those if you were a parent lucky enough to have 3 children in the various different platforms. And when the assignments had a lot of steps or were too long or the program was too cumbersome, it became really difficult for students to persevere through that information and finish the assignment. Finding time, a lot of parents had to work with their student on the schoolwork when they got home from work, and that became a challenge. Keeping their child on task all day long, and then students missing their friends were challenges. So we used this data in conjunction with the state survey that was put together and made plans for our upcoming school year. On June 18th, the Minnesota Department of Education published a 100-page document offering guidance and mandates for schools as we had to plan for the 2021 school year. In that document, it specifically stated that we needed to ensure that every student receives an equitable education and has equal access to learning and instruction during this pandemic. It also mandated that we learn from our community experiences and the state data that was presented and improve our education models in our schools. It also said that we needed to be working on state standards, that this was not going to be a year where we were just working to maintain learning, but that we needed to be back on schedule and working through those state standards at every grade level. They also indicated that we would need to plan for 3 different scenarios of school, and that we would need to be able to transition seamlessly from one scenario to the other, depending on the situations and the needs within our school and within our community. So scenario 1, as they called it, is in-person learning where all students are back in the classrooms. Scenario 2 is hybrid learning where we have we have a 50% maximum capacity rule, and that we have to have strict social distancing and capacity limits. And scenario 3 is that distance learning. So we got right to work as soon as we had this document and were able to read through it. We created design teams made up of teachers and administrators to work on that distance and hybrid learning. We took inventory and started ordering needed supplies for disinfecting and PPE products and other safety products that we're going to need to keep everyone safe here in this building. We started planning with our food service director. We made sure our ventilation system was working properly and that the building is ready to go and welcome our learners back. We met with other principals and superintendents across the state to network and share ideas. We were really trying not to invent the wheel as much as possible and work with each other to kind of come up with a collective efficacy in being able to provide statewide the kind of education that Minnesotans are used to. And we did this virtually, and we continue to meet regularly. I had a Zoom meeting with principals across the state of Minnesota yesterday, as a matter of fact. And we met with a representative of Minnesota Department of Health to talk more specifically about all of the requirements for safety. We created communication pathways and protocols. We know that we are going to need to really be communicating with our families and our students and our community along the way this year as we pave new paths. So we've tried really hard to come up with some very specific communication pathways. We know that our teachers are going to need and continue to need professional development so that they are providing the very best education to our students. So we are working actively to continue to do that throughout the school year. We've planned health and safety protocols and procedures based on what we've received from Minnesota Department of Education and Minnesota Department of Health. And we've stayed up to date with those changes that happen on an almost weekly basis, if not daily. On July 30th, Governor Walz revealed how we will determine what scenario our school will be operating on. So what they look at is a 14-day positive COVID case rate, which means that it rolls every day. Every day the 14 days changes. We divide that by the population of the county divided by 10,000, which is roughly 2.6. We have a roughly 260 plus thousand people in the county of Wabasha. And that gives us what they call a 14-day case rate. So we take that number and we apply it to this table. And again, that number is the rate of infection per 10,000 people in the county of Wabasha for us. So they have determined what they feel is safe when the rate of infection per 10,000 people is given to us. I'm just going to quickly check here. Okay. So when we look at Wabasha County's current statistics, on that July 30th, we were at 10.63 for our case rate number, which would have put us in the elementary all back in and 7th through 12th grade in hybrid. Our cases seem to be dropping in Wabasha County. So right now, as of yesterday, our case rate was 7.86 people with positive COVID results for every 10,000 people. So if we were to start school tomorrow, we would be all in person for both elementary and 7th through 12th grade. I'm going to just pause really quickly and let you know that Mr. Freihammer is online and he is not feeling well today. So he's here and he's present, but he will not be having a conversation or I don't think anyway. So we wish him well and we hope he gets better soon. So we have three scenarios. The in-person, which means that all students are in classes. The staff and students are wearing masks. Students are separated as much as possible within the classroom. In most of our elementary and high school classes, we can get students 6 feet apart when all students are in the room. We have a few rooms where in the biggest of our classes, they are 5 feet apart when we are in-person learning, but for the most part, we can still get students 6 feet apart in their classrooms. We would also be trying to maintain social distancing as much as possible, but it's not as strictly adhered to as when we are in hybrid. Hybrid means that we can have a maximum of 14 students in a classroom while the teacher is with the teacher in the classroom. So the way we have decided we would do this is that the other half of that classroom would be learning along with the teacher and kind of streaming along with the teacher in an alternate classroom somewhere within our building. So they're streaming along, they're supervised by a qualified staff member, they're getting support, they're getting opportunities to get up and move and take breaks, but all are wearing masks. And we are really held to that strict social distancing of 6 feet, and we are enforcing that. And then in distance learning, all students are engaged in virtual learning with their teachers. So that alternate classroom, what that means is that part of the classroom would be in the class with their teachers. And another part of the class would be in an alternate classroom space. And again, they might be streaming for parts of that time. They might be engaging in videos that the teacher has planned. They might be off of the screen completely and working on some kind of project or task. But they would be participating with the teacher in the classroom. Again, having a qualified school member that's providing that supervision and that support. So again, no more than 14 students can be in any classroom during hybrid. Students are in an alternate classroom setting, and they might be in the elementary, it might be the library, the computer lab, the small and big gyms. In those bigger spaces, in those gym spaces, even in the library, there would be, there's a requirement that once students are in these cohorts, that there is separation and that they are safely contained in their own space. So we are working on getting those materials to do that. The high school library would be a place that we would put high school students. The computer labs, we have a couple that are open and not often used, the auditorium, and we do have a couple of other empty rooms. At any time during hybrid, during students are all in, families who wish to keep their student home can choose to do that. If we are in hybrid mode and parents want to keep their children home when they are not in class with their teachers, again, they would have the choice to do so. We're going to switch to transportation. So every day, our buses are going to have gloves, sanitizers, paper towels, disinfectants on the bus and readily able to use. Masks will be required for students and the bus driver. We will have a bus assistant on there as well in the mornings. That bus assistant will be wearing a mask, eye protection, and gloves, and they will be doing a health screening of every student as they enter the bus. And that includes a visual inspection of a student just to see, do they look run down? Are they flushed? Do they appear to be coughing? You know, any of those kinds of things. And then a temperature check will be done with an infrared thermometer, which means that they won't be touched. It's a thermometer that we can just point at the forehead and it gives us a reading. If a student were to fail a health screening, they would be returned to the parents if they are present at the bus stop. If there is no parent present, that student would be isolated on the bus, in the front of the bus, next to the door, next to a window, so that we can optimize the ventilation and keep that student safe as well as all the other students on the bus. Then once they got to school, we would contact families. Students will have assigned seats in the morning, and they will, as much as possible, load back to front. And 2 students would be the maximum that would be in a seat. And every time that we can, we will make sure that those 2 students are family members as much as possible. There's always been a no food or beverage rule on the bus, but this year it will be very much strictly adhered to, and mostly because when a student has something on the bus, something to eat or something to drink, there's a tendency to share that, and we do not want students sharing food or drinks this year. If we are in hybrid learning, the buses have a 50% occupancy requirement. So most of our buses are 77 maximum capacity. So this would mean that there would be a 38 maximum capacity. Morning and afternoon will need 2 routes. So if we are on a hybrid and we can only get 38 students on a bus, then we would need to have 2 different routes. So the buses will go out, they will pick up 1 round of students, deliver them to the school. They will, the bus would be disinfected. The bus will be disinfected after every time that it is used. We would go back out and pick up the rest of the students. The first route would probably drop off students around 7:25 to 7:30, which has been a typical drop-off time for us in the past. Then the second route, we're not quite sure time-wise, but we know that we would be able to get them here by 8 o'clock. Communication will take place about pickup and drop-off times, because in a hybrid situation, those times may be different than they would during the in-person learning. And then in distance learning, there's still transportation that is available to families who would be utilizing that school age care program. And we are expanding that school age care program from preschool through 8th grade. For any students who would be dropped off by family members in the mornings or picked up in the afternoons, in the mornings they would be screened by school staff. So we will have someone at each of our main entrance doors in the elementary and the high school. They would be, again, doing that visual inspection of a student as they're entering the building and then doing a temperature check. Students who drive to school are going to need to park in the front student parking lot. Sometimes they have in the past parked in the back. That will no longer be available to them. They will need to park in the student lot so that we make sure we get them screened. And if we are having practices of any sort before school, the coach or advisor would be the one responsible for doing those screenings before practice begins. We have had camps going on here this summer, so all of the coaches have been doing that this summer, so it's a practice that they're used to doing. Food service. So our in-person learning and hybrid situation, this is still kind of a work in progress, but this is what we're thinking right now, is that we are definitely going to provide meals to children at school or at home and at the normal fees. So it's a little bit different in that last year we had a grant to provide free meals to families if they were at home. We don't have that option currently. Doesn't mean that we might have something come up along the way at some other point in the year, but right now there would be the normal cost, whatever that cost is for you as a family. We will use the cafeteria as much as we can, but we need to make sure that it's safe for students. And right now, our understanding is that they need to be 6 feet apart. And that means that with our tables that we currently have, we could only seat 60 students at a time, which is much reduced from what we are used to. So for a lot of students, the likelihood of them eating lunch in a classroom is probably the way we will need to go, at least at this point. In the serving line, we would be able to, we've created a lot of safety measures. There's a good word. So we have plexiglass shields across the entire serving line. When a student walks up to that serving line, the staff are going to have the trays. The student will indicate which choices they would like. We still will have choices available. There won't be as many as we are accustomed to, but we will have choices available. And then the school staff in the food service will be obviously practicing. They'll be masked, gloved, all those things. They will plate the student's food, and then the student picks it up at the end of the line. So we have those plexiglass shields. We will require 6 feet of social distancing between students in line. There will be increased disinfecting of the surfaces that students are eating on, if they're eating in the cafeteria area and then around our kitchens. There will be no self-serve options available. Normally our students have keyed in their student lunch number. We will not be able to do that anymore, so we are looking at the possibility of a scanned code that we could put in. And as I said, students would not be touching that tray until the end of the line. I'm trying to monitor the chat as well. And one of the questions that came up is, would it help if we tell the school if we do not need the bus at all? We will be sending out a data collection tool to our families that will ask if you're going to need transportation or if you're not going to use it at all, so that we can begin to start to make plans and know exactly how many students we have. Same with food. Are you going to be using our food service or not, and those kinds of things. So you can be expecting some kind of, it's not a survey because we really need all families to do it. So a tool that will collect all that data for us. So back to food service, students will be eating again in probably various parts of the building. There is not enough time in our day to safely move 60 kids at a time through our cafeteria. That would require us to have about 9 different lunch periods. And that's just not really feasible at this point in time. 7th through 12th grade will go through the lunch line and take trays to their classes. Preschool through 1st grade is the one group that we are thinking will eat in the cafeteria. They will be eating 3 to a 10-foot table, and they would be facing the same direction, or is it 12-foot table? Anyway, they're going to be 6 feet apart. And the reason being this group, it's because typically they are the ones who have the most trouble eating without making messes, and we don't want to ruin their classroom environment with food and drinks and things like that on the floor. 2nd through 6th grade will go through a line that we set up in the elementary commons area, and then most likely go back to their classroom space. If we can find a way to accommodate more eating in the cafeteria, we absolutely will do that. And then when we get to distance learning, meals are still offered to families if that's something that they're interested in, and more details will come regarding whether meals will be delivered or available for pickup in different locations. Again, we're going to need more information from families to be able to really make that decision. Health services. There's been lots of questions coming in lately about how are we going to know, how is this all going to work? So if a student or staff are sick, they are going to need to stay home. If a student or staff tests positive for COVID or showing COVID-19 symptoms, they're going to need to stay home until the decision tree criteria is met. So the Minnesota Department of Health has put out a decision tree, which is my next slide. And if you Google decision tree, Minnesota Department of Health, you could get access to this document. But anyway, it gives us basically, if a student has tested positive, this is what criteria they need to do. And it's mostly that they stay home for a minimum of 14 days and they're at least 3 days fever-free, that kind of thing. If they are showing symptoms but they haven't tested positive, there's I think it's 10 days that they stay home with, and 3 days fever-free, and so on and so forth. If a student or staff has recently had close contact with a person who has been diagnosed with COVID-19, they also need to stay home until that decision tree criteria is met. We again will be doing those daily health screenings, and we're hoping that we can get to a lot of those students before they even really enter our building or are in our building for too long. There's a question here. It says, is eating in the classroom for scenario 1 or just scenario 2? And right now, for the majority of students, it will be for both scenario 1 and scenario 2, just again to make sure that we are allowing kids a 6-foot distance. We also will have health screenings. Again, I said that we would do that every day, but we'll have one or two. We're trying to find 2 different places that we can have for students who might be exhibiting COVID-like symptoms. We want those spaces to be private, and so that our students can feel like they're being treated in a confidential way. And we also want them fairly accessible to a door where a parent could come and pick them up. So we are looking at options within our building. We haven't decided exactly where that will be. Our school nurse, Laura Strobush, will be the one to respond to COVID-19 concerns and coordinate with health authorities such as Wabasha-Kellogg and help us determine what needs to be done as far as contract tracing and those kinds of things when we do have positive COVID cases. So those designated isolated spaces for students who might have COVID-19 symptoms would look like a room that would be divided, so we could have maybe 2 or 3 students in there with pipe and drapery. There would be options for privacy. It would be closed off, and we would also again be looking at that social distancing piece. That student or staff member would be masked immediately. Right now we're under a state mandate to be masked, so we don't have to worry about that so much. The nurse would be wearing full PPE. The parent or guardian will be notified to come pick them up as soon as they possibly can. The student or staff that would be supervised at 6 feet of social distancing until they leave the building. Most of our staff obviously would be driving themselves home and wouldn't need to wait, but if for some reason there was a health issue that we didn't feel it was safe for them to drive and needed somebody to pick them up, we would be doing the same things that we would for students. And we're going to ask that families report any COVID-19 positive cases among their family or close contacts with COVID-19 positive cases within 14 days of their diagnosis. And we also want to assure you that all HIPAA and FERPA laws will be observed. We know that confidentiality is important. We also know that this is a virus. People are going to get it. People have gotten it in our community, and you know, it's not something to shame people about. It's not something to treat people like they should be, you know, separated from the community. Obviously, they need to be in that 14-day quarantine, but once that is over, they are symptom-free. They're not carrying the virus anymore. We are good to go. There will be a system in place to self-report. We just haven't established what that would look like yet. There's another question that says, I heard that age 5 and under do not have to wear masks. Is this true? The answer is yes. So kindergartners through 12th graders and all staff need to be masked. Our preschool students do not need to be masked. There's a lot of evidence that indicates that they are not able to wear masks appropriately and take the safety precautions that are needed, you know, not playing with it, keeping it in place, those kinds of things. If you happen to have a preschooler who you've been working with that knows how to appropriately wear a mask, they certainly can. It's just not a requirement at this time. So here's that decision tree. That's what it looks like. So again, if you Google decision tree for people with COVID-19 symptoms, state of Minnesota, you will get, or Department of Health, you'll get this. We will also at some point have this posted. Other safety measures that we are doing, we are removing extra furniture from classrooms. So actual furniture like, you know, chairs and couches and things like that will need to be gone to create more space and more room for our students. And any personal items, we're asking teachers to take them home. The reason being, we want the spaces not to be sterile, but easily cleaned, and want them to be, again, as open as possible so we can get as much space between students and staff. Classrooms will be misted with a disinfecting fog several times a week, if not daily. Extra room cleaning practices will be put into place every single day. Student desks will be facing forward in rows and spread out as closely to 6 feet as possible when we are all here. And again, when we are in hybrid, that would be a requirement that they are for sure at least 6 feet apart. Bathrooms and door handles would be cleaned multiple times throughout the day. All of our faucets in our bathrooms will have touchless. I think the majority of them up here in the high school were. Now we are installing them in the elementary. We will be scheduling bathroom breaks as much as possible to alleviate having more than one class show up at a bathroom. Social distancing, again, we will have markers and visual cues and those kinds of things on the floors and sidewalks and in the bathrooms to help students follow that 6 feet social distancing. We also have barriers in between sinks and urinals and things of that nature. And again, masks will be worn by staff and students K-12. Good hygiene practices will be encouraged throughout the day. In the elementary, our students have a sink in their classrooms so they could wash their hands throughout the school day. Up at the high school, we don't necessarily have that all throughout the day, but we have lots of sanitation stations so they could use the hand sanitizers, and every teacher will also have hand sanitizer available and ready for students to use. In the elementary, recess will be scheduled by cohort when we're in hybrid, so meaning that smaller group, wherever they are, if they're in a classroom or in their alternate classroom, those are the students who will be having recess together. Normally, if we are all in school, then they would have recess with that homeroom class. Students will not be able to share their supplies this year, so everyone will need to make sure they have their own supply of pencils and pens and crayons and such. We have hand sanitation stations throughout the building, so if students feel the need, if they sneeze or cough and need to sanitize their hands, there are definitely going to be places for them to get what they need. Water fountains will not be available, the actual water fountain piece that kids sometimes put their mouths on, but the water bottle filling stations will be available. So we encourage students to bring water bottles so that they can fill those up. Plexiglass barriers are going to be in high traffic areas. Lunch will be different, again, with less students in the cafeteria, or they will be in their classrooms. And the building will be closed to visitors that are not essential to our day-to-day business here. So that means parents will not be able to walk their child to their classrooms in the morning. They will need to drop them off at the door, and we will have systems in place to help kids get to the right place. In the elementary, a lot of times we've had parents wait in the building for their child. We will not be able to allow that to happen. So parents are encouraged to wait either in their cars until they see their child come out of the building, or we will have places for you to wait outside if you choose. So in-person learning, what's that going to look like? To continue to provide the high quality education that you have become accustomed to, we will be having students in their classes. And again, for the most part, we can still get pretty close to that 6 feet, if not the 6 feet. I think 5 feet is the closest they are in any one of the buildings or any one of their classes if we are in-person learning. Safety will continue to be a priority, and social distancing will occur as much as possible. The elementary school day will run 8 a.m. to 2:50. It will operate similarly to what it has in the past. Lunch, recess, and breaks will be scheduled by homeroom class. In the high school, we are moving from a 7-period day to a block schedule where there are 4 periods in a day, A and B days. So I'll show you an example of what that might look like. But their day will run 8:10 to 2:40, allowing at the end of the day for those students, older students, to get to the back of the bus first, and then we will load so that our younger students are towards the front. Each day will consist of 3 90-minute blocks, a 30-minute lunch, and a 60-minute power hour. That power hour is something new. We just don't feel with the 90-minute blocks that students are going to have a need for a study hall. So we are using that time to get to some of those things that we've always wanted to work on, some of those life skills, some of those connection, team building kinds of things that we haven't been able to do in the past, although we need to make sure they're done safely. And they will have 10-minute breaks in between each block. So power hour, this is a list of some of the things that will take place. This class will be held Monday through Thursday around the lunch hour. It will be driven based on the needs of each grade level and the classes themselves. Teachers will be given materials that they can pull from, but it will be different in each classroom potentially. Also during this time, band, choir, if your student receives ADSIS services or special education services, they may be engaged in those activities or those classes. And the teachers will be incorporating the power hour concepts into their classes, so you don't have to feel like your child is going to miss out on the things being taught in power hour. 90-minute blocks, that will definitely be different from our 53-minute blocks that we have typically had. Teachers will definitely be teaching differently. So please don't think that teachers are going to be lecturing for 90 minutes. That would be excruciatingly painful for everyone involved. So typically you might see a mini lesson or some direct instruction, or, towards the beginning of the class. Then there would be student work, student practice with the guidance of the teacher, and then they may be set free a little bit, either on technology or not on technology, to do some kind of learning activity. They may end up doing some kind of formative assessment to see, do they know the information, do they need more practice, and then some reflection time on, what have I learned, what do I still have questions about, those kinds of things. So it allows us to really differentiate, which sometimes we haven't had the opportunity to do in a 53-minute block of time, and it will definitely need to be interactive to keep kids engaged and to keep teachers engaged. So if students are using their time during these 90-minute blocks, they should have very little homework, if any. Hybrid learning. This method is going to allow for more space between students, reducing that risk of transmission of COVID-19 while maintaining that high quality educational experience. So students are going to be placed in cohorts, and those cohorts will remain together throughout the duration of hybrid learning as much as we possibly can. It's much easier to do in the elementary than it is in the secondary level. There's a question here about how will we be splitting up those classes. We are looking at, most likely it will be alphabetical to allow families to be attending school on the same days. But there probably will be some crossover due to different circumstances, different student needs, those kinds of things. So we're working on that right now. Obviously, going from a 7-period day to a A-B block schedule has kind of blown up our schedule. And myself and Heather Kosick, she's actually working on it more than I am, but are putting together the schedule right now and seeing what works the best. But for the most part, it appears that it will be an alphabetical decision. During hybrid, Wabasha-Kellogg can fit all of our students in our building and still be below 50% maximum capacity that's dictated by the Minnesota Department of Education and the Minnesota Department of Health. They are saying that if we are less than 50% of our maximum capacity during hybrid, it is safe for our students to be here. and they truly can all be in here, and we are still below that 50% maximum capacity. The structure of that school day will run from 8 to 2:50 in elementary. Each class will be again divided into cohorts, group 1 and group 2. Group 1 students will learn in class with their teacher on Mondays and Wednesdays. Group 2 students will learn in class with their teacher on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Days when they're not in class, they're with their teacher. So if I'm a group 1 student, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I will be learning in an alternate classroom with a supervisor that will be in communication with that teacher. Fridays will be distance learning or alternate learning if you choose to send your student to school for all students in elementary. Our teachers need extra planning time. They absolutely need that time to put together the kinds of quality learning activities that you are expecting. So students will be still learning on Fridays. It will just be all done through distance learning or through the computer or iPad. Families do have the option, again, to have their child completely remote, learning at home or at school with a qualified supervisor, or they may choose to keep their child at home for distance learning. I have a message here. I just want to check. Yeah. During hybrid, movement within the building will be minimized as much as possible, which means that our specials teachers would be coming to the classroom. Students would not be moving. Students will remain in their designated space while teachers rotate. Lunch will be served in their designated space, and recess and breaks will be provided again within that cohort versus a grade level or something like that. So on a typical day in hybrid learning, English and math are offered every day, or reading, depending on the age of the students. Social studies will be twice a week. Science will be twice a week. PE, physical education, will be every day. And specials will be a couple times a week. In 7th through 12th grade, the school day runs 8:10 to 2:40 on a block schedule. Each grade level will be divided into 2 cohorts, again, just like elementary, group 1 and group 2. Group 1 will learn in class with their teachers on Mondays and Tuesdays because they have to go through their two days a cycle. And then group 2 will learn in their class with their teachers on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Days when students are not in class with their teachers, they will engage in streamed learning of their teachers in an alternate classroom, again, available to them. Fridays will be distance or alternate classroom for all. And families have the option to have their child complete work at school in the alternate classroom with a qualified supervisor, or they may choose to keep their child at home for distance learning on the days that they are not in with their teachers. I see questions rolling in. That's great. I will get to them as soon as I'm done here, okay? So don't think I'm not answering your questions. It's just getting difficult for me to monitor questions and talk through this presentation. So hybrid learning in 7th through 12th grade, again, movement will be minimized as much as possible. Lunch will be served in a designated space that they have been spending time in. Breaks will be provided within the class. On the schedule, they have 10-minute breaks in between classes, but in reality, those breaks will be staggered. We can't have 7th through 12th grade all out in the hallways at the same time. So we will be staggering those breaks, especially during hybrid. So here's what a hybrid schedule might look like for a 10th grade student. So if I'm a group 1 student, I'm in class with my teachers on Monday and Tuesday. On Monday, I would go to my English, my algebra. I'd then go to lunch. I'd have my power hour, and then I might have a Woods class. Tuesday would be world history. I might have lifetime sports, lunch, power hour, and then biology class. Then on Wednesday, I would go through my Monday schedule, but I would be with my alternate teacher or alternate supervisor in my alternate classroom, and Thursday the same. And then on Friday, I would either be in my alternate classroom or at home. And I'm going through every single one of my classes except power hour on Friday. Distance learning will be provided virtually as it has in the past to continue that high quality learning for students when it is not safe for us to attend school in person. Distance learning is an option for all families at any time, and we are working on plans of how that would look and how we would help your student get that quality education. Elementary school, the day would run 8 to 2:50 again. Students will attend classes offered by teachers in a virtual environment. Teachers will continue to offer the classes on the same schedule they would as if students were here at school. So if students are at home, they would have the option to sign up and receive breakfast and lunch. And you know, if math was 8 to 9 in their classroom, that's when the teacher would be running math class. And we would want students to be engaged in whatever the activities are from that time. Secondary, the school day runs from 8:10 to 2:30 in a block schedule during distance learning. And again, we want students attending classes offered by teachers in a virtual environment on that same schedule. So if they were originally having their first hour class at 8:10, we would want students to be engaged at 8:10 to get the instruction. And they also would have an option to sign up and receive breakfast and lunch. So the only difference under distance learning for elementary is that the specials teachers would provide assignments for the week on Mondays, and the assignments would be due for the week on Fridays. So students and families would be able to have some flexibility in when those special classes were completed. And the distance learning schedule for 7 through 12 would be essentially the same. So I've talked about this school age care that's available during distance learning, and what it looks like for us is that any students 3 years of age through 8th grade would be available free of charge for families of critical workers during the school day. So if families want to register and send their children to our school age care program, they are absolutely able to do that. If you are for some reason not in the critical workers category, you would be able to, we would still be able to provide the service to you at a cost. The lunch and breakfast would be available during that time that they are here. And we really want students to be actively engaged in distance learning throughout that their normal schedule, Monday through Friday during the school day. We found that students who were unable to do that really struggled the most in managing their time, getting assignments in on time, those kinds of things. They had a lot more questions. They didn't understand the material as well. So as much as possible, we really want to encourage families to help us help their students by having them engaged during the school day in their distance learning. So in May, this is the list of critical care workers that were provided. So this is the list. If you have one of these, a job that fits in one of these categories, you would be considered a critical care worker, and you would be eligible for that service free of charge. So this goes on for 4 slides. There's a lot of jobs here. Now this could change or be altered in some way, shape, or form by the state, but at this time, this is the list that we are operating from. Grading. We altered grading practices last quarter because of the situation. We are back to the same grading practices that we have been involved in the past. So preschool through second grade will continue to have skills-based report cards, and third through 12th grade will be back on an A through F scale. That means that secondary students who do not meet minimum levels and fail a course may be required to retake a course. It also affects their eligibility. And 9th through 12th grade students may be required to complete credit recovery if it's a class needed for graduation. We are really planning that the first few weeks of school will involve a lot of connection and with students rebuilding those connections and really getting a solid relationship built. We've also streamlined the list of programs and tools that teachers can use. We wanted to make sure that they were, number one, compatible with all of our different devices, and number two, fairly user-friendly, so that there isn't a lot of learning that has to take place. So here's an example of some of the main programs and tools we will be using. We decided that preschool through 12th grade, based on the overwhelming challenges that parents reported with all of the different programs and platforms, that we will be using Schoology preschool through 12th grade. And there will be a uniform organization to that page. So the first thing that you will see is a slide that will have the objectives and the tasks for the day. So students and the parents know exactly what's going to be expected of the student that day. And then underneath that, there will be a weekly folder that is at the top of the page, so you don't have to scroll down as time goes by. But at the top of the page, that you can access all the materials for that week. Teachers have committed that they will reach out directly to student and parent a minimum of one time a month to talk about that particular student's progress, answer questions, get feedback, all those kinds of things. Again, to continue that partnership, we really need to all be partners in this process of educating our kids. I will have a principal's newsletter that will come out every 15th of the month. It will include updates that the state has provided, things like that. So if information changes before the end of the month, I will update and highlight those updates and then send a notification to everyone so that they can access that information that's been changed. Again, students should have very little homework in this process. We are really trying to make sure that if they're engaged during the school day, that we can get the work done that we need to get done. Last quarter, especially for the secondary level, attendance was taken based on a check-in question, those kinds of things. This time, attendance will be taken based on student engagement in class each day. So are they present? Are they, did they enter the Zoom? Did they do the assignment? Those kinds of things. Those are the things that teachers will be looking at to ensure that a student was present and in class so they can take attendance. If for some reason your student won't be able to engage in learning during the school day, we want to meet with you and set up a plan so that you're not counted absent, and that we can be providing the kind of educational program that's going to work for the family and the student. Teachers have committed that they will update their grades each Monday by 9 a.m. because Schoology sends out a progress report to parents on Mondays at 10 a.m. So we want that information to be as updated as possible. We're having these sessions. So today obviously is August 6th. I have another one tonight here in the auditorium. From here, we will take all the feedback and the questions that we received from the from these sessions to the district task force that has been formed. That's made up of administration, other major decision makers in the district, as well as a couple of parent representatives and a couple of student representatives. We will be meeting on Monday, August 10th. We will make final decisions about and try and put our plan into a final draft form to bring back to the school board. The school board will determine which scenario we will start the 2021 school year on August 12th. So if our numbers remain the same and the state is saying it's safe for all of us to come back into this building, we could still determine that we want something more restrictive based on the needs of our community. We would just have to get permission from the Minnesota Department of Education to do that. Once we have everything set, we will post the documents and information for all to have at their access. And that district task force will continue to meet on a fairly regular basis to revise information and procedures and protocols as needed. So here we are finally done. Thank you for listening to me. I know that is a ton of information, and I know that you have some questions that have been rolling in. So I'm going to try and get back to my chat here quickly and see if I can answer any of these questions. What we're going to ask that you do, we really do want to know, what are you most excited about? What challenges do you see? Do you have some suggestions for improvement? Overall comments. So on Facebook, there is a link that you can access, and we would really, really appreciate if you could take a few minutes and add the information from all of these questions into that survey so that we have more of a permanent record. Let's see. Is eating in the classroom for scenario 1 or just scenario 2? It appears that it will be for both. Again, we would really like to be able to access our cafeteria as much as possible, but we also can't have 9 different lunch rotations. So we will be continuing to work on that plan, but it's not completely set yet. But right now it looks though most students will be eating in their classrooms. How many students in each classroom? So if we are in-person learning, MDE and the Minnesota Department of Health are saying that we are safe enough to bring all students back into the classroom. So if there are 20 students normally in a classroom, there would be 20 students in that classroom. Again, we have been working on placing desks and clearing rooms out so that we can create as much distance between students as possible. And really the closest they are in any of our classrooms is 5 feet from one another. And again, everyone's wearing masks if we're in person. That would be the closest they would be while sitting in their classroom. If we are in hybrid, we need to have that strict 6 feet social distancing requirement. And there would only be a maximum of 14 students in a classroom at a time. In most cases, there would be less than that. And students would definitely be a minimum of 6 feet apart, probably more. Someone asked, how are you splitting up classes for the hybrid days? So we haven't really decided how we would do that. So any feedback you could offer would be great. In the elementary, it's a lot easier than it is in the high school because of the different classes students have the opportunity to take. So if you have any feedback or ideas, that would be great. Again, when we're looking at classes in general, we are looking at probably an alphabetical split, but there will be exceptions to that. Will we get to do the classes we signed up for? For the most part, we are definitely going to try to do that. You would be contacted by Mrs. Kosick if we need to make a change in your schedule. How about all in-person days? Will you still be at the max 50% capacity, or will it be over capacity to have all students present? With all of our students in the building, we are still at less than our maximum capacity in our facilities. In a classroom, if we are in person, we would be over the 50% capacity potentially, because the 50% capacity is around 15 kids. Will we have access to your presentation after the Zoom meeting? Yes, we will be posting this presentation on the web and probably in Facebook. If all students are present, we will be below that 50% occupancy for our facilities. Jim says we are very committed to making the school available to all families and students during distance learning. So if you do not fit into the critical worker category but still need your children to be at the school, with the support of school staff for academics, social, emotional, health, and nutrition, we are researching and in contact with MDE and Minnesota Department of Health in order to find ways to make this available, as we believe this is definitely a need in our community. Teachers have the option to not come into the school, correct? That is not correct. Teachers are expected to report and be here unless there is a medical issue that would require them to be, or that would put them in that at-risk category. We would require medical documentation. So I know that there have been statements made in the media that this is a choice for teachers, but it is not a choice that they can just make. There does need to be some medical documentation behind that choice. We will accommodate as much as possible the teachers that do have those at-risk factors, and we'll be working to figure out how to utilize them in their services. It may change our plan if we have several teachers that can't be here and be present. What will you do if kids don't show up for distance learning during the day? Because I know some families, the parents don't care if kids are online or not. So students would be marked absent, and we would continue to seek out reasons for why students are not participating. It could mean that we would have to file truancy if a student was not participating in their school. We are bound by the state of Minnesota to make sure that we are educating our students, and if we are not able to do that, then we need to involve other services and resources. If kids start in-person learning, are they able to switch to distance learning at any time? If we start with distance learning and then want to join in-person, are we able to at any time? Yes. There are some districts that are asking that families make kind of a commitment on a quarterly basis just for our own planning. But we also understand that this will be a fluid system. There will be students who get sick with a cold, and because cold symptoms are similar to COVID symptoms, they're going to need to be out for a period of time. And that means that they would be in distance learning, and then they would come back when they are able to do so. So we know that there is going to be an ebb and flow to who's in our classrooms and who isn't. And we really truly want to work with families so that they feel good about what's going on. Student says, I know we have chores during the day that need to be completed on the farm, and we will probably be required to do them if they are online. Again, I would encourage the family, if there's any way that those chores could be done outside of the school day, to work with work within their means. If that is a case where there's no way that that can be avoided, we would want to meet with the family to figure out a system that would work for the family and our students, and get our students the education that they need. How many children will be allowed on a bus? If we are all in-person school, the limitation is 2 students to a seat. And all students must be masked. If we are at hybrid, at least that's my understanding. If we are at hybrid, it is a 50% maximum capacity. So a maximum of 38 students would be on the bus. But my understanding is that in most cases, it would be less than 38 students. So bus routes will change, may change a little bit. Yes, they might. So the bus company will be in contact with families before the school year starts, just to make sure that you know what route, what pickup time, all those kinds of things is going to take place. That survey that I mentioned over here, the feedback and questions link, has been pinned to the top of the Wabasha-Kellogg Facebook page. So again, we really encourage you to log in and give us your feedback. Do we need to sign our kids up now if the parents are essential workers for the school age after school program if we go to distance learning? There's nothing wrong with having it having that paperwork taken care of, so you know that the very day that we go to distance learning, you are covered. We that can only help us make plans if we know who's coming. Are we doing distance learning every Friday? Yes, we are. However, students have the opportunity to come and be in an alternate classroom during that school day on Fridays. Jim says there will be a form that will be shared with all families that will allow you to tell us if you will need transportation, food services, school age care, and what your plans are for the different models of education. So our all-in or in-person learning, the hybrid, and the distance learning. If we do distance learning, do we have to be at a computer all day, or do we get breaks? Absolutely, there will be breaks. We know that it is not healthy to be sitting in front of a computer all day long, and we know that that's not best practice for learning either. So absolutely, there will be breaks. There will be time outside, hopefully, and we will work around it. Distance learning, I'm sorry, distance learning only takes place on Fridays in hybrid, and then obviously during distance learning. All right. Next question is, when will they let us know when we are going to switch between one form of learning to another? Will it be like snow days where we find out in the morning or at night, or just as soon as possible? For the most part, if the entire school, the high school or the elementary, is moving from one, or shifting from one to the other, we are anticipating that we will know these things and be able to plan kind of ahead for that as we see that that case rate number changing. You know, it should be going up, and we can see, oh, okay, we are probably heading toward hybrid, or it's going down, so we are probably heading toward all in. But there may be times where a student is COVID positive and we find out, and we have to notify families that of certain students or of the class that they would be engaging in distance learning due to a positive COVID case. So there will be a combination of both. Again, it's just going to be super important that we all remain in contact with one another. If a child is not feeling well or feels they have a cold, what is the protocol? Will you ask the child to get tested for COVID? Will the child have to quarantine, or will they be sent home until they feel better? Unfortunately, cold symptoms are similar to COVID-19 symptoms. And we can't require families to get a COVID test. Families may choose to do that. And then we would know one way or the other, but um, we can't require that. There is a protocol, again, on that, what's the words? The decision tree will let us know what we need to look at, but typically you would be looking at a 10-day absence, unless it is something that can be diagnosed by a doctor, like strep throat or norovirus or something along that line. Then you would follow that doctor's recommendations for return to school. How soon would we have to notify the school if we choose for our child to participate in the distance learning? You can let us know at any time, but we will be sending out that parent form that we need you to fill out that would indicate what your plans are. My husband wants our 5-year-old to go back to school for the social interaction. However, if you are encouraging social distancing, will she even get to play with her peers? Yes, she will get to play with her peers. If we, again, are in in-person learning, we are not held strictly to that 6 feet of social distancing. We are going to try and offer things like Foursquare, where students are separated. Games that they could play while they're out on the playground, so that they can still interact with one another, but and still be encouraged to do that social distancing. If one kid gets in a class, will we just do distance learning for that class, or would it be half, or would it have to be like the whole school or all the school or all the elementary? So if we have a positive COVID-19 case, there is some contact tracing that takes place. And depending on the level of contact, that is what will determine if a student, if just a handful of students needs to be removed for a period of time, if a class needs to be removed, or if a whole school needs to be removed. My understanding from the webinar I was in on yesterday is that these are direct contacts. So if I was positive, COVID positive, and I was sitting, they may look at the students that have been in my surrounding me in my classes. Contact for them is anything that is less than 6 feet of social distancing and more than 15 minutes. So a direct contact is someone who has been within my 6-foot bubble and has been there for more than 15 minutes. So more likely, we are not going to see an entire classroom that would be distance learning as a result of a positive COVID. It might just be a handful of students that need to quarantine based on that direct feedback. Will we get to interact with our friends at all in the high school? Yes, you will get to interact. It will be different. We will need you to be monitoring your 6 feet of social distancing. Jim says we will be working very closely with Wabasha County Public Health to make decisions as it relates to positive COVID-19 cases, exposures, etc., as it relates to time out of school, whether continuing to be in class for a particular class, or if it is necessary to make changes to the model we are currently in as a school district. And that's very true. Public health is really the entity that does the contact tracing. They may be asking us for information about who's in that class or classes, and contacting people that way, but we would be working with them to make recommendations on having to go distance learning. Do buses in the school have masks for the kids that don't show up with one? Yes, we do. We will have masks available for students who don't show up with one or lose one during the school day. We have them for our staff as well, because we know we're human and some days are better than others. Any other questions? You're asking great questions. Jim says, in all situations, the most current recommendations and protocol from the Minnesota Department of Health and CDC will be consulted and utilized to inform our decisions. I apologize, I missed the first half hour. Will the students be screened at the school? If they are riding the bus, they will be screened as they enter the bus. If they are being dropped off or driving to school, they will be screened as they enter the building. The school will be asking that students come to school with 2 masks. We will have masks available for students if they forget them or they get dirty or something like that. We would appreciate it if families would get a couple of masks for their students. What if the children refuse to wear a mask? It's a public health issue. Right now, it's a state mandate that everyone wears a mask. If a student is refusing to wear a mask, another option would be a face shield. But they need to have some kind of face covering. And if it's really just becomes an issue, we may have to talk to the family about a distance learning option. Great questions. Trying to think if there's anything left that I didn't say. I can't think of anything. All right. So I want to thank you so very much for your patience through this process. I know that it has been something that a lot of families have had anxiety about, that a lot of families have worried about, and we really truly have been working very, very hard to come up with some options for students and families that are going to work. We definitely need to continue to work in partnership for the best education that we can offer our students in the safest possible environment that we can. And we absolutely value your input and your involvement in today's presentation. Are the elementary teachers wearing face shields so young kids can see their lips? That is an option for teachers. They may choose to wear a mask or they may choose to wear a face shield. And there are definitely times where wearing a face shield makes more sense so that students can see their lips. All right, it looks like we're kind of winding down with questions. Again, I would really highly encourage you to go to the Facebook page if you have access to it and fill out our quick survey on the other 3, the other 2 questions, and if there are other comments that you would like to make. We will be taking all of these questions and all of these things to our district task force and making our final determinations for right now, knowing that it is going to be a fluid process. So thank you very much. I hope that you're all staying healthy and take care. If you have any other questions for Jim Freihammer or myself, please contact us through email or through phone. 651-565-3559 is our phone number. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.